Well, it looks like a beautiful morning. It's going to be pouring rain all day. And I'm heading off to meet Philippe, who just got a brand new fuel-injected Ural. So I'm going to take my trusty carbureted Ural out, and we're going to meet and go for a little ride. And this will be Philippe's first time, I think, on anything other than pavement with his Ural. So instead of taking the 800 today, which is right behind me there, instead of taking the 800, we're going to take out the gear up. And because it's pouring rain, it's time to put on all the aero stitch stuff today and try to keep dry. So once again, I found myself in the parking lot at the big shopping center near my house, getting ready to go for a ride with the guy I'd never met before in person. And joining us also would be Super Dave, who would be on his second ride with us. And as most motorcycle guys do when they get together, the first thing we did was have a nice long chat.
Fuel injected.
And I was pretty impressed by this new Ural. No carburetors, fuel injection. They'd improved the intake tubing, the air filter. The final drive seemed different. Had a nice fully stainless steel exhaust system as opposed to the rusty system on my bike. They had improved the gas can, which now had a real lid. The gas can on mine, they actually made a rather large point of saying it was not officially for carrying gas. It was labeled as a fluid can. The other nice thing with this new Ural was that it had triple disc brakes. Philippe liked my blackout drive cover for my headlight, which I believe was from Poland.
That was the military night driving attachment.
And of course, we didn't want Super Dave to feel bad, so we took a look at his bike, and he was very proud of his first dent on his skid plate that he had received the week before. After about 50 minutes on the highway and a quick stop at Tim Hortons, we were off. Whenever you go on a group ride with a Ural, you are usually the odd man out because you're riding a bike that's considerably slower than pretty much any other bike on planet Earth. And once you start getting into the woods, there's a lot of places the Ural can't go because it has very little ground clearance and it's wide. So you kind of keep to yourself when you own a Ural. So this was quite nice to actually be riding along with a fellow Uralista. And poor old Super Dave was going to be the odd man out today. Another thing to keep in mind is that a Ural, especially the older carbureted ones, are very thirsty. You do not get very far on a liter of fuel with these things. So here I am topping up not only the gas tank, but also the fluid container. And that would give me a range of, 200 or 300 kilometers. So if you're thinking that buying a Ural is going to be a money-saving proposition as opposed to running a small car, certainly in the case of mine, yeah, it isn't. We stopped just before the dirt portion, and Philippe wanted to know when he should engage two-wheel drive.
Yeah, you know what? You don't only use it when you get stuck. Because as soon as you have that engaged, you can barely turn. Like, it makes it so hard to turn,
You can run the Ural in two-wheel drive as long as the surface is kind of a low friction surface because there is no rear differential. So that rear axle is locked together, which means as soon as there's half decent traction, it's really hard to steer. It wants to go straight. I also mentioned to Philippe that he didn't have a skid plate, so he'd have to be a bit careful about what he rolled over with that front wheel because that's right in line with the bottom of the engine. Now, I am not a great off-road rider on a two-wheeled motorcycle, and my Ural skills are even more lacking because I can't really bring the Ural on rides with the boys when they're on their regular bikes. So the machine gets used the vast majority of the time putting around the suburbs, doing shopping runs, and taking my kids and neighboring kids for little joyrides. So I didn't have a lot of advice to impart to our friend. People will often ask what it's like to ride a Ural, and in a way it's probably closer to driving a really badly designed car in some ways than it is a motorcycle, because it doesn't lean the same way a motorcycle does. It leans the way a car does. When you go around a corner, it leans towards the outside of the corner. And due to the asymmetrical design, it's not like a Can-Am Spyder where you've got two front wheels and a rear wheel forming a triangle, or a trike conversion on a conventional motorcycle where you've got a front wheel and two rear wheels forming a triangle. On the Ural, the sidecar wheel is not beside the rear wheel. It's kind of forward of it. And because you sit on one side and all the weight of the engine and the bike and the transmission are on that same side, your weight distribution is totally lopsided as well. So if you do a hard left, you've kind of got the sidecar to your right, and that acts as a pontoon, and you can fly around the left-hand corner and lean on that sidecar wheel. But if you do a hard right, all that weight transfers to the left, and the sidecar wants to lift. And as soon as the sidecar lifts, then the Ural goes from being a strange three-wheeled car to being a motorcycle again. And you'll see when you watch guys who really know how to ride a Ural and they fly the sidecar, they'll drive around on two wheels, and at that point it handles just like a regular motorcycle. Here I decided to let Philippe take the lead. It's always more interesting to have a motorcycle in your field of view when you're riding, and I wanted to see how he was doing and also what a Ural actually looked like as it was bouncing down this road. Philippe's bike was about 6 years newer than mine, and in those years Ural had certainly made a lot of improvements. And from what I understand, the highway cruising speed was quite a bit better, the fuel economy was better, the braking was better. The one downside, though, was that the purchase price had crept up quite a bit. Even my model, which had the Japanese carburetors, the electronic ignition system, the Brembo brakes up front, was quite a bit more expensive than its predecessor when they were really just shipped kind of as is from Russia. So it's nice to see the improvements, but by the same token, it makes it harder and harder to kind of stomach paying the purchase price, especially if it's going to be your only ride, because you're pretty much committed to riding by yourself or riding with guys on Urals, because you're simply not going to be able to keep up and really hang with guys on traditional motorcycles. I have to say, it was pretty cool following another Ural and watching it bounce around. Kind of made me feel like I was in an old movie or something. And Philippe, for a guy who had just recently bought this machine, seemed to be doing pretty well.
That's good.
Super Dave was quite pleased with himself because he'd managed to make it up the little hill where he had fallen a week before. I don't think any of our viewers will be surprised when a few minutes later we rolled up to the old sandpit, which is a great spot for everybody to kind of get their feet wet. And considering this was Philippe's first day off-road, this would be a great spot for him to get to play with the Ural, and especially give him a chance to throw it in two-wheel drive and do a little hill climbing. And 800 pounds being pulled by 40 horsepower. It's amazing that it makes it at all up that hill. especially because the gearing on the Ural isn't super low. And now it would be Philippe's turn. Philippe set off with the two-wheel drive engaged for the very first time in his ownership of the Ural.
Give her! Give her!
As you saw there, even in first gear, the gearing isn't really low enough to do a lot of churning. In a situation like that, you're going to have to do a little bit of clutch work to kind of get it going. The Ural, a lot of the time, will have more traction than it has power.
The thing with these is first gear is very tall, so you just have to abuse the clutch. Lovely. And that is how you do that.
Now, we talked about how the Ural steers in two-wheel drive. Watch the front tire right here. You can see that even in that sand, it was plowing a bit. It didn't want to turn.
How was it?
That's cool. I do understand what you say, power, horsepower, get your momentum.
Get your momentum. Take two. Yeah, baby. Give her. Nice. No muss, no fuss. Or as they would say across the pond, easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Exactly, that's it.
Nice, a little washing.
No messing, no fuss.
Run over David.
One bare leg.
Better. More gas, more better.
So far.
There goes Dave. Give her. There he goes. More gas. Yeah, no drama. Nice. It's a lot. Woo! Nice. It's a lot better when it's wet.
Turn the ABS off.
Yes.
How deep is that?
Whew. In the middle, there's a big hole because we've driven through it. It's pretty deep. Success!
Yes!
Freedom! It's a lot easier when it's wet, eh?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Now that everyone had mastered the little hill at the sandpit, or at least managed to make it to the top, we decided to head behind the sandpit into this trail network that led to a lake called Black Lake. And if you watch some of our early videos, we spent a lot of time frolicking around in Black Lake. And Black Lake actually has a road, a nice gravel road that just heads right into the lake, and then it's underwater for quite a long time, and then it pops up the other side. And I had mentioned just before we headed out that with the Urals, there's no way we would be able to cross Black Lake. The water, it would be too high for the air intake on the Ural, not to mention the fact your final drive would be underwater and probably get contaminated. And I wasn't sure on a Ural, to be honest, what would happen to the transmission oil or the engine oil as well. So I did make it pretty clear we would not be doing our traditional crossing of Black Lake. Here, because the trail was a little gnarlier than the road we came in on, I did pop it into two-wheel drive. And the more slippery the surface, the less you notice it's in two-wheel drive when you're trying to steer. This is the spot right here coming up. I think a little farther along, right here, where the fellow in the Ford Focus had his car stuck. And if you want to watch that earlier episode,
I think this is where his car was hanging off.
and I had just told that story to Dave, so I wanted to point out that spot for him. And imagine this road here, it's not much bigger than the Ural, and the fellow we found here stranded in his Ford Focus had been making this commute in and out from the sandpit to Black Lake. I'll put the link for that video at the top of the description below in case you haven't seen it. The trail gets really nice along the shores of this lake, and I'm not quite sure if this was an abandoned rail line where they pulled up the tracks, and that's why there's this nice gravel bed. From this perspective here, it kind of looks like it might have been an old railway line that they pulled up. And there's nothing tricky about this section. The only thing to worry about is that there's a few washed out culverts, and it's certainly something you wouldn't want to hit at speed in a Ural because it would suck up all the ground clearance you had pretty quick. And the lowest part of my bike, and Philippe's for that matter, would be the oil pan, so I really did not want to bang it here. And right around this next bend, you'll see you're on this nice, well-groomed gravel road, and then it just goes into the lake. And if you keep going, the gravel is still there, so there is a nice firm bottom. You see the lily pads on the right. I don't know how deep that is on the right, but it's deep. So I decided just to roll into the lake a little bit and just see how deep it was, but I had no intention of crossing. And then at some point I pulled in the clutch, and I guess the water was deep enough that there was water inside the clutch housing, because as soon as I pulled in the clutch, I had pretty much lost forward momentum, and then Philippe decided to pass me. And as you can see, it's over the center hub of his wheel. I'm having a little trouble here because my clutch is wet and I can't get going. And there you see Philippe, he's flooded out his brand new Ural, sucked in some water, and he is dead in the water, no pun intended. You didn't really get to see it on camera, but to the left of me, he was kind of off the shoulder of the road, so it was quite a bit deeper there. And you can hear me, it sounds like I'm in neutral. And I'm playing with the two-wheel drive to see if somehow the rear differential is not working.
I'm not getting any gears here. Just pull me back.
Luckily for me, one of Dave's superpowers is the ability to pull on things.
Okay, hold on. Hold it. Why don't I have reverse? I got no reverse. There, well, Dave, come here for a minute.
I want you to know that my boots are now filled with water.
Can you run the throttle while I play with the gear shift? Just keep it running?
For some reason as well, my bike, the idle wasn't acting normal, so I had Dave hold the throttle while I screwed around with the forward reverse lever.
Okay, I think I got reverse.
And here you can see I'm letting out the clutch, and I got nothing.
Pull me back. That's weird, I lost my gears.
At this point, I had no idea what the real issue was, so we just resorted to muscle power once again, and we've flooded out quite a few bikes over the years in this exact spot.
I went to put it in reverse. Nothing happened.
Is this still recording? Fish in boots. Fish.
We certainly haven't got this all figured out, but one of the things we have figured out over the years is that if you're going to be doing quite a bit of maintenance, wrenching, pulling, whatever, you might as well take the time, ditch the helmet, ditch the jacket, and you can see out there, it's pretty deep. That's up to my knees. As soon as Dave and I got out to the bike, I could feel the vibe right away was that Philippe was really stressed about this. He had his brand new machine, and he had taken it out, and on his first off-road jaunt, had sucked water into the motor and killed it. And I was feeling a little responsible here as well, because even though before we had left the sandpit, I had mentioned we wouldn't be crossing Black Lake, the fact that as soon as we got there, I kind of rolled into Black Lake, I think was misinterpreted by Philippe that we were going to go for it, that somehow the conditions were better and we were actually going to cross it. So I was keeping a brave face here because I didn't want to let Philippe know that I had no idea whether his bike was destroyed or not either. Right after we got the Ural to shore, a couple of fellows on ATV showed up.
If they ask, we crossed it successfully.
The ATV guys were pretty curious about these two strange machines that they'd found out in the woods.
It's certainly got in my boots.
Ça, c'est un 2014. Ça, c'est un 2008.
Ural, who made that?
C'est fabriqué en Russie.
Normally, with a flooded bike, the first order of business is to pull the plugs and pump the water out.
Yep, c'est ça. Philippe, comment ça va? ton premier sortie off-road.
Ouais.
Il n'y aura pas de l'eau, mais juste pour être sûr. I don't think there's going to be any water, but we're going to check because it's a brand new bike.
Right.
They've been here, they know. There's nowhere out there they can't go. The modern. And the funny thing is, it's when you get past this that you get to the real water. This is just the...
I'm so glad you two got stuck before I fell over.
Well, I had no intention.
Well, thanks. Hey.
But you know what? I had no intention of going across. I was going to go out 20 feet and turn around and come back.
And he overtook you.
And then I stopped, and all of a sudden, bro, and I said, I hope his balls are big, but I hope they float.
Friday, you want to film something funny? Take the, underneath the bike. It's gonna drip for half an hour.
I got the nice water out of the muffler. It's like a little cascade.
Okay, next step. I start the bike.
You take them both out?
Yep. Out.
All right, let's take a look. You're not going to see anything, but hit it.
Hang on, I got a flashlight on you. If you want.
Go. There was water in there. That was just like, I saw the hole. I said, I'll be on a bit of an angle. And you, whoa! Woo! C'est bon, c'est bon.
How long?
That's it. You're good. Now you buy a BMW, you get a Philippe screwdriver.
I get a Philippe screwdriver and one, I think it's a 13mm wrench.
Yes, and
Which
if you buy a Ural,
which fits absolutely nothing.
you can make a new Ural on the side of the road with a coat hanger.
2 Urals came out here, only one will get
Only
back.
one shall return. Well, you might be towing me out of here because mine doesn't seem to want to go anywhere. I don't know if the clutch got wet and it just started slipping or what. Because it is theoretically a dry clutch.
Well, that's the end of that then. Might as well push it into the 8-foot and that way you won't have to fill out the
Call it and
environment
drive me
report.
into town so I can call it in stolen.
Yeah.
I'll push it over one of the many
If you're going to
cliffs.
start something, I'm staying well out of the way of you.
Oh, let the starter rest. Plug wires are on. All right. It's probably
Do you
just...
want a bit of WD-40?
It might be a little moist on some of your
I've
electrical
got
too.
WD-40 actually.
Yeah, okay.
It might help you out.
Ouais, ça c'est pas fou mettre ça dans.
That was gutsy, I gotta say.
Gutsy move.
Oh,
It was a gutsy move.
From you or me?
For you. No, I stopped because I knew. And I thought,
That was a ballsy move, my man.
That was it, ballsy, ballsy.
Very, very ballsy.
No, I would go for stupid.
no.
That was a ballsy move.
Wow,
You
man.
went straight to it.
And now it's clean again.
Okay, here you go.
Since it works. Okay. Hit it. Oh, almost.
Oh yeah, baby.
I still got leakage.
Is that water boiling or is that leaking? I have a new plug, I think. It's the crush washer. It's not crushed. It's over crushed. It's probably too tight from the factory, and the washer's it's only really supposed to be used once.
Yeah.
So
Well, I've got-
I may have a spare plug.
Residual water.
You sure it's... Now this side's not doing it because it's not that hot. No, it's not hot enough to boil water. That's leaking. You want to...
I don't think it's leaking.
Let's throw a little water on there. Anybody got any water?
I don't think it is. Hang on, right, left boot or right boot?
Yeah. Okay. Here we got a water receptacle right here. Yeah, it's pumping. It's leaking. Okay.
It's leaking.
So shut her off. I'll see if I have a new plug.
I'm afraid to shut it off.
Oh no, it'll start. I mean, hopefully. Now, do you use the same spark plug?
It's in a box. I use one that's round, preferably.
It's working. How's your crushed washer? Is it the same plug? NGKR, NGK, BP. It looks the same, but look at your crush washer. Friggin' Hercules crushed it. It's supposed to be like that with a little crush. What did the guy crush it with? Impact wrench? Anyways, luckily the threads are still there.
If you don't mind, I'm going off to go and look at something more interesting. Let's have a quick check back, see how Riley's doing. Lovely!
For some reason, that one spark plug was leaking. We could see a little bit of bubbling coming up around the plug, and I'm not sure what was causing it. We didn't really feel like tightening that plug anymore into that aluminum head, so we decided that it was certainly going to run well enough for us to get home. I checked the engine oil, and it didn't seem to have any contamination. The ATV guys wished us luck and headed off.
Always pack out your trash. Did you hear it splash?
Splushed!
It's floating.
There's the trash.
Philip decided to pull one of the rubber plugs out of the bottom of the trunk and let some of that water out.
Drainage number 2.
I thought only Harleys marked their territory. You almost had an emergency, and luckily you're fully equipped with your first aid kit.
From Germany, from Russia.
Ah.
But it's dry.
Isn't there supposed to be a small bottle of vodka in there?
No, the salesman told me not in Canada.
And actually that kept the water out.
Yes.
So if you actually had a first aid kit,
It would be dry for the first aid kit.
Now that we had Philip's bike running properly, we got on my bike and tried it, and my bike had magically healed itself. So I think it actually was just somehow water in the clutch that was causing it to slip, because after sitting there for a while, the bike started right up and drove away with no problems.
He's digging a hole.
Philip got hung up on that culvert and had to pop it in two-wheel drive. We had come to a consensus that the smart move now was probably going to be just to go home. Philip wanted to get home and change all the fluids in his brand new bike, and I think that would be a pretty good idea. We weren't sure if the final drive had any contamination in it, since we hadn't opened it, since we didn't have any oil to change it anyways. I also think perhaps Philip had had enough for his first ride. I think he'd had enough excitement for one day. He seemed pretty relieved that his bike was up and running again. That certainly could have turned out a lot worse. You try to start a bike that's got pistons full of water, and the water's not going to compress, so something has to give, and whether it's a bent rod or the starter motor shearing some teeth off the flywheel, whatever. I think we lucked out on this one, and thankfully he didn't try to start the bike once it was flooded. Once we got out to the road, we decided to stop and check the oil in Philip's bike just to see if there was any contamination. When it's contaminated, it'll kind of have a consistency like a frothy milkshake.
Beauty. No water.
So the good news was, it didn't look like the engine oil was contaminated at all. Everybody was feeling pretty good right about now. Philippe's new bike was running fine. Mine was running just as well as it ever ran. And Super Dave was just happy to not be riding a Ural, I think, on this particular day. Philippe was in the lead, and at one point, for some reason, he took a right turn off of the main road. Knowing that Philippe was fluent in Morse code, I gave him the signal to turn around. Once we hit pavement, the rain stopped totally, the sun started peeking out, morale was high, and the decision was made that we should find somewhere to have a celebratory beer. This route is really popular with bikers on the weekend, and normally this parking lot would be full of Harleys, but on a rainy Sunday morning, we were the only patrons.
Okay.
Hey, I'm the only one who's single here.
What is this place called anyway?
Déjà Vu Cafe Bar and Grill.
So here we are at the Déjà Vu, and I've been here before, so I'm experiencing Déjà Vu. And Dave is ingratiating himself to the staff by emptying his...
I tip good.
He tips good. Yeah. Buy low, sell high. That's Dave's tip. Nice. Dave's washing his hands UK style. Little face wash. There, that's...
Okay, I'm ready to eat. Bring it on.
That's the UK military police sponge bath.
Exactly.
Oh. Here, let us see what
Oh, the
comes
U-boat
out.
captain's going off now.
All right.
Yeah.
Das Boots. Nicely done, sir. Nicely done. That was filtered water, too. What, by your socks? All right, yeah, leave those as far away as possible. Yes, I don't think anyone will be sitting at that
The thing
table.
is, my
Yeah, at
pants
least
are
I'm-
wet up to here.
I want you to know, at least I'm trying to hide them away under the table somewhere. It's a clear sign that I'm married. Try and hide it.
I'm not.
All right, Philip,
Yes.
this was your first ride with the awesome players.
Yep.
And it was also your first off-road ride on your shiny new bike.
Yep.
So how would you sum it up? How did it go?
I'm not a human captain, and it was a stupid note for myself.
Gutsy move, gutsy move.
But trail is pretty hard. The bike, because of the sidecar, when you maneuver, the sidecar wants to go somewhere, and you want to go somewhere else. Sometimes there's a fight in between both of them. Yes.
Healthy.
Hey, I'm 44. That's how it is.
44 is just but a child.
Yeah.
Alcohol will make it all better.
But it's fun. You drive faster than I do. I was like, whoa, there you go fast.
This
in
is
the
my
trail.
first ride of the year on my Ural.
Yeah, but nevertheless, both of you you were going fast. Whoa, there, good.
On the trail?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no,
Well,
that's as
just
fast,
go
but
like
that's as fast as I go. So,
It's got two speeds. Full speed ahead or stop.
yeah,
That's it.
stop. And Dave, how was ride number 2?
Oh, awesome. As it should be. As it always should be. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed this one today because I actually made it up the sandhill without falling over, which is quite an achievement.
And you refused to ride on the Ural. You didn't want to take it for a spin.
Those things scare me. They look like it's a blender just waiting to happen. I just imagine you falling off and losing a limb.
Yeah, but even if you fall off, the bike doesn't fall over.
That's a good point. But actually, I really enjoyed it. Yet again, I was really pleased to come out. Thanks for the invite.
It was horrible for my part. But the part of the water. Yep.
All in all, it turned out to be a pretty good ride. Once again, if you have any questions about the bikes, the gear, feel free to drop us a line. You can leave us a comment here on YouTube. If you like the video, hit the like button. Also, if you'd like to be notified of when our next video comes out, hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, and then you'll be the first to know when we post something fresh. You can also reach us via email if you have a question or comment by going to awesomeplayers.com. And while you're at awesomeplayers.com, if you hit on the order tab, you can order one of our stickers. which is great for plugging a hole in your sidecar and 1,000 other possible uses. We also have a Facebook page, so if you go over to Awesome Players on Facebook, a lot of guys have been sending us pictures of their rides and ride reports from all around the world, so it's kind of a fun spot to keep up to date with what's going on with Awesome Players around the world. Once again, thanks for joining us on another small adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club. Thanks for watching.